All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, How to Use File Analysis to Govern Unstructured Content. We're excited that you all could be here with us today. And the first thing I'd like to do is just take a second to introduce our speakers. My name is Shayna Horka, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Gimbal. I'm joined by our two key speakers, President and Chief Strategy Officer, Chris Kaplinger, and Director of Sales Engineering, Dean Meisenheimer. Now, before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items to go through. Keep an eye out for a couple of poll questions during the webinar. We will also have a live Q&A after today's session, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar, and at the end, we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. If you have any technical difficulties, please send us a message and let us know so we can help you solve any issues you may be having. Now, to kick things off, I have just one slide here to tell you a little bit about Gimbal as a company. Gimbal is a records, information management, and governance software company that was founded in 2002. We have a client success team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 17 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP. And our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as large global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. Now to dive a little bit deeper into the problem that Gimbal software solves. The reason that Gimbal exists is because we recognize that so many enterprises struggle to manage the sheer volume of information and systems they have. For years, they have been adding business applications and information, but haven't been able to create a consistent way to manage the life cycle of their information across these systems or dispose of unneeded or outdated information. This makes doing business more difficult, less secure, and less compliant. Gimbal's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive software products include records management, content governance for SharePoint, document management for SAP solutions, and now Altitude, a file analysis solution. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chris so he can begin the presentation.
Great. Thanks, Shayna. Assuming you can hear me okay, just give me a confirmation there.
Sounds great.
Awesome. All right, well, looks like we got a great crowd today. Appreciate everybody being here. So as Shayna was talking about some of the problems that we find out there in the world and the reason that we created this solution. So one of the most common user stories that we hear, and we hear it all the time from almost every single client that we have and every prospect that we talk to, it really is understanding the chaos of unstructured content and cleaning it up. Normally, this is network file shares, and these shares are department shares for HR, accounting, finance, or other places where people may just be sharing their company videos or the lunch menus or something like that. These are also user shares that they're putting on the network file shares where every user has their own directory. And then often these become more than network shares. They become OneDrive shares or box shares or somewhere like that. But what happens is these get used constantly and there's files being put in, but there's no governance around it. There's just chaos when people are adding stuff in here. The second place we find that major problems happen is email. And I don't know if it's a problem, but there's a lot of email to begin with. That's how we communicate every day. Lots of email threads. The email threads end up in lots of different people's inboxes. And to make it worse, people start taking those emails and they start saving the messages off. They might start saving the PST files or something else on the hard drives onto their local machines and everywhere else. And it just creates a massive amount of chaos that really no one knows what's there and typically doesn't have a good solution for figuring it out. The last place we find information and we start finding unstructured content where there's a lot of chaos is SharePoint. So I've been around SharePoint for probably 20 years or getting close to that, pretty much since SharePoint was created. And what we did when it first came out, it was really great. We gave everybody a site, gave everybody the ability to create sites, and people started doing it. They started creating sites for the department, for personal and all these things, but they weren't governed. And these sites just started getting created massively everywhere. And with those sites came more content. So it ended up, all we did is we took this shift of the network file shares, the chaos that was there, and we put it into SharePoint. So all we did was lift and shift. We moved it to another place. But most SharePoint out there in the world, or places like SharePoint, they really aren't governed. They're just another dumping ground for information. And when this is a dumping ground and chaos like that, it's really impossible to govern it. If you can't govern it, you really can't get and apply policies on it. And to make it worse, today in May is going to be the least amount of unstructured information you ever have inside your organization. It's just going to continue to grow. So I've got some illustrations that talk a little bit about that. So this is from IDC, some research that they did. They say, and based on the statistics and the way that the trends are going, that the world's going to create and replicate 175 zettabytes of data by 2025. Okay, 175 ZB, that doesn't sound like much. What is it? Well, it's about 175 billion terabytes, or about approximately 175 trillion gigabytes. That's a lot of information. And to give you an idea how much information that is, if you stuck all of that on Blu-ray disc, it would be a stack of disc about 1.5 times the Earth's diameter. That's 6.5 trillion Blu-ray disc. My original illustration on this used DVDs, but the stack of DVDs went here into the moon a couple different times, and it looked totally unrealistic. It's like, well, nobody's going to believe that. So I decided to make it a little bit simpler with these Blu-ray discs. So of all this data, 80% of this new data is likely to be unstructured. And this is also from IDC. And this just sticks with the trends that are happening today, that about 80% of information is unstructured. And really unstructured information is all that information that's really not your normal business data. You know, it's your emails, it's your SharePoint data, your content, your contracts, your chat, and all that other information is considered unstructured. And the worst part about it is, at least 33% of the new unstructured data created is going to be rot, redundant, obsolete, and trivial information. Now, when I went to get kind of some information for this webinar, 33% was the smallest percentage I could find because I didn't want to over-exaggerate things. The truth is, it's going to be bigger than that. 33% is probably going to be what the best case scenario is inside of an organization. I hear 50% a lot. I even hear up to 75 and 80% a lot is what exists in existence today. So that's 2025. So that's 5 years away from now. What does that growth look like, and where have we been? Well, the only thing I really have stats for is 2018 because there's no good data based on what happened in 2019 yet. But in 2018, we produced about 22 zettabytes. So that's 22 billion terabytes or 22 trillion gigabytes. That is a lot of information. And a lot of that information is right inside of your hard drives, your servers, your cloud storage, and everywhere else inside your organization. So you think about that, that's about 7 to 8 times the amount of data that you have today. So even if it's not going to be that 175 ZB number, it's going to be a big number, and it's going to continue to grow year after year after that. So what's the next problem around this? Classifying this data manually, it's going to take too much time. It's very laborious, it's very expensive, and it's not very cost effective to do. And of course, it'll just take forever. The other thing is, if you have it done manually, it's probably not going to produce the results that you want. Most people don't get great results out of manually classifying data that already exists. It usually just doesn't work. So what I did is I threw some simple math together, and I just call this Chris's Simple Math. High school, university was a long, long time ago for me, so I don't really remember how to do a lot except some simple multiplication. But what I know is 1 terabyte of content is typically around 3 million files. And we just get this because in the e-discovery cases, we know that about 3,000 files per gigabyte, which gives us about 3 million files per terabyte. So let's say that you hire a super fast human that can classify a file in 10 seconds, okay? This is a fast human. This person's going fast if they're doing it in 10 seconds. I know I can't classify files that quick. So 3 million files, 10 seconds, that's 30 million seconds, over 8,000 hours, or 4+ man years per terabyte. And in reality, as your organization has 10, 50, 100 gigabytes, if not petabytes of information out there that need to be classified. So in general, there's no way you're going to do this by hand. It's just an impossible task. And then lastly, the last problem that we have is the problem of sensitive and private information. Well, there's no way that you're going to figure that out if you haven't started trying to conquer the chaos first. So if you don't know where this is at, your sensitive and private information is at risk. And with GDPR and CCPA and the other privacy regulations that are going to absolutely come to your state or your country, wherever you're at, they're coming and they're going to happen, and they're going to have to be dealt with. So you have to figure this out. Again, it's another common problem that we hear all the time that our user base is trying to resolve. So what do? We didn't really come up with a method, but there's a way to do this, and it's the reason that we created the software we're calling Altitude that you're going to see in a minute with Dean. Is the first thing we have to do is we have to understand the data types that we really care about in the organization. Email is going to be one of them, so you might as well figure you're going to have to deal with that. Chances are you're going to have some type of sharing site out there, whether it's network file shares or whether it's SharePoint or whether it's some other content store. So you need to understand what those are. Then we need to go crawl those data sources, get them crawled, index them so we understand what it was there. Then we can come back, and now that we have it, we can start analyzing it. We can start putting reports together to understand that the problem that we have. And the sooner we start analyzing that data and putting those reports together, the sooner we can start understanding the trends. Unfortunately, we can't go look at trends of information we didn't even know we had before. So the sooner you start, the sooner you can start understanding what those trends are. And the sooner you can start understanding of the effort you make to clean it up and seeing how that's working. Then we can start the remediation process. Remediation process is going to be moving data to the place that you want it, migrating data to the place that you want it, quarantining data that may be sensitive, may be private, information that shouldn't be out there available to everybody. And then once we do that, we can then start placing long-term policy on that information with systems such as records management. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean, and he's going to go through a couple more slides here.
Yeah, go ahead and give it one more click there. The build is not quite correct.
There
we go. So Gimbal Altitude is a SaaS-based offering. The core application sits in the cloud and then connects to your different data sources to be able to go out and analyze and find what you have there. So your end users log into Gimbal Altitude through a web browser, whatever their browser of choice may be. And that's where they can set up policies. That's where your business analysts can establish the workflows and identify, what you want to analyze, look at the results, export reports, things of that nature. Altitude uses a series of connectors. And a connector is what installs into the client's environment. And the connector then communicates back to the manager web. The connector talks to the manager web and says, do I have actions I need to take? Are there scheduled jobs I need to go execute? But it's always that communication upwards to the manager web, not the other way around. And the connector then runs on a Windows server in your environment, or can actually be deployed out to individual client workstations, so laptops, desktop computers. And the connectors then use a series of agents to talk to and connect to the different content sources. So agents for Altitude, an Altitude connector can include a file system agent that knows how to crawl and talk to file shares, email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange in the cloud, Google G Suite, Box, and other agents are being developed and can be deployed. So the agents reach out, talk to the various content sources, execute the policies, do the analysis, and then take the results, and the connector feeds those results back to the Altitude Manager web. If we go to the next slide, go ahead and build it out. The way the connectors work is a connector uses its agent and identifies a data source, a file share, a SharePoint, or a OneDrive in this example. The agent will then execute a search. So for my file share, the agent will go out and say, oh, here are all of the available network file shares that can be a target for analytics. In your SharePoint environment, here are all the individual site collections that are available for me to go run analytics against. In OneDrive, here are all the individual OneDrive accounts that have been set up that I'm aware of and can be configured to use in data analysis. So the connectors execute the agents identify the various sources, and then as you'll see in the demo, I can combine those various data targets to say, oh, I want to go analyze this set of information. This is what I want to look for, and execute my analysis. So next slide. So we're going to move into the demo. I think we're going to bring up a poll question first while we do that. So
Yeah, if everybody could take a second, a poll should pop up on your screen. There should be 2 questions. If you could take a second to answer those, and then we'll go over the results as a group. These will be anonymous, so don't worry about any of your information getting out. And I also want to remind everyone that you can feel free to submit questions in the Q&A portion on your screen, and then at the end of the demonstration, we're going to go over those questions as well. We'll give it a couple more seconds to get all the answers in.
All right, results are still coming in, I see. So we'll give everybody just one more second. We're in no rush here. Okay, so here are the poll results. We see file shares. Boy, everybody's got file shares. No great shock there. But really quite a variety of different content sources. File shares, OneDrive, Microsoft 365, so SharePoint Online plus SharePoint on-prem, other ECM repositories, Box.
And Dean, no big surprise there. Just as we mentioned in the beginning, network file shares, the thing that we hear the most, and SharePoint and Exchange.
And then if we take a look at the results of the second question, where is your organization in their file analytics needs? It's good to see almost a third of you are actually planning your first file analysis project. And another third of you, unfortunately, don't have any plans for it. Maybe there'll be something that comes out of this we can help you with. So I'm going to close out the poll questions here, and let's move on into the demo. So what you see on the screen now is the Gimbal Altitude. This is the main interface for Gimbal Altitude when I log in as a user. The menu bar across the top, very visual, shows me all the main functions that I have available to me. On the right, I see recent notifications, both the ones that are unread as well as the ones that have been read. And this just gives me a quick update on here are the most recent activities that have taken place, the policies, the searches that have gone on. And then the 4 blue squares here in the center just kind of show me, for this instance of Altitude, what has been configured. So I can see that there are 2 different connectors configured with this Altitude instance. Those 2 connectors are aware of 7 different data sources. So we have different agents configured. And across those data sources, there are 36 individual targets that are available for analysis. If I click on connectors, it'll let me drill down and I can see the 2 connectors that I have configured. The first that we're looking at here, the lower one, is a connector that's installed on one of my network servers, SP16. It's server-based. That server, that connector, actually has 7 agents installed and is connected to and looking at 7 different data sources. Across those data sources, it has found 33 individual data targets that are available for analysis. My other connector is actually a connector that's installed on a local desktop machine. Happens to be installed on my laptop. So it's looking at just one source, most likely the file share, since it's a local workstation, and it's found 3 different targets out there that can be searched. Since it's my personal laptop, I limited what it would search against. Now, if I want to see the details about what sources this connector is aware of, I can just click the link. That drills me in and I can see that the connector on my server currently has agents configured for my Exchange Online mailboxes, Gmail mailboxes, Google Drive, OneDrive, PST files, SharePoint sites, and Windows file share. And then across each of these data sources, it tells me how many available targets there are out there. So if I wanted to see all of the network file shares that it's aware of, I can click And here are all the shares that it found when it went out and searched that, that file server. There are 7 or 8 different network targets that I can go out and search against. If I want to look at one of my other sources, I can come back. I can take a look, for example, at Google Drive. There's only 2 targets. If I click, I see the 2 Google Drive paths that the system can go out and search against. And at any point in time, if I want to see a list of all the data targets, I can just click. Now it brings up a big long list. I can see every data target that I have, all 36. And throughout the Gimbal Altitude interface, at any point in time, I can come in here and I can click on any of these column headings, and I could now sort by any of these column headings, ascending, descending. I can come in, filter my view. I can choose what columns are displayed. So I can kind of configure and slice and dice my view of the information however I need to. Going back to the connectors, for any of my connectors, step 1 is always to go out and do that search. So set up a search, have it go out and search a specific data target. And then once it executes that search, come back and tell me the list of available data targets that are in that source. Once I have configured and I've set up my connectors, I've set up my agents, and I'm aware of all the different data targets that I have out there to run analytics against, now I can come back and begin to execute various data governance activities. So if I click on data governance, this brings me into the governance section of the product. And on the left, again, you see kind of consistent navigation, the various activities I can take advantage of. And a governance job is configured with a workflow. The workflow is what guides the activities that will happen. What will it go out and analyze, and how will it analyze it? The policy is what controls how that workflow is executed. What data targets do I run against? How often do I run? What do I do? What kind of various options do I want to configure as I run? So let's start with the workflows. Workflows are created using a workflow editing tool. I can create any number of workflows. Those get stored in the SaaS environment. And if we want to come in and take a look at one of these workflows, I can click on it. I can open the workflow up and I can view it through the web browser. I can browse through the various steps in the workflow and see what's going on, but I can kind of just view the workflow from here. If I actually want to create or edit a workflow, I use the workflow editor. And this is just simply a graphical application that lets me drag and drop, lets me right click, add various functions to workflows, and build out an Altitude workflow to go out and run analytics against a specific data target. So this is where I can come in, and every workflow kind of has a very similar structure. There are different sequences that it goes through. For, in this case, a network file share, we start with the top level. We look at each path that we want to process. As we go through each path, we then look at that path and we identify every folder in the path. As we go through each folder, we look for all the files in the folder. And when we get down to the file level, that's when we actually perform analysis on the files. Now, if there were certain folders I wanted to exclude, I could actually come in here, click, and say, process every file, or I only want to process, in this example, certain types of files. Process only things that match, or, process things that don't match, because maybe I want to exclude JPEG files and PNG files, things like that. So at any level of my workflow, I can create various filters to control what is processed, what isn't. And then in the workflow, I can come in here and I can set up a path that says, well, when you find a file, I want you to test and see if that file contains Social Security information. And we're going to do that by searching the file contents. And we could even click and search the file name as well if we want. In this case, we're just going to look inside the file to see if there's Social Security information there. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do it with a combination of a regular expression, or I could combine regular expressions with strings. So I could come in here and say, look for Social Security, or look for Social Security, or look for a pattern of numbers that match a Social Security number. So I can save this expression. When I do that, it gets captured in the workflow. And now as the workflow executes, we'll look at the file, we'll run those tests. If we find it, we'll set a property that indicates my Social Security test is what was positive. We'll write some values back to a database table so we can generate a report at the end. And we can come in and configure what type of information we want to capture. There are a variety of different tokens. Here I'm capturing file name, path, which of my tests triggered the positive result, what was the suspect text, and when was the file last accessed. But there's a broad variety of information that I can capture and report back on any positive test. Right? So I can start to create reports that are very, very informative about what's found during an analysis. Now, if it doesn't find my Social Security number, it comes over and goes to the next test, and now it looks for credit card information. And it will do essentially the same process. It will look for a regular expression, it will look for certain terms, maybe Visa, MasterCard, Amex. If it finds a positive report, it saves that. If it doesn't, it simply exits out of the workflow, goes back to the folder, grabs the next file, does it all again, right, until we've processed everything. So that's kind of the structure of how you can set up workflows. And workflows can be set up for any type of data target, data source. If it's an email inbox, now it's going to go to the inbox, look for the folders in the inbox, then look for the emails in the folder, and even go down to the attachment level in the emails. Right, so it's all configurable. I then take my workflows and I wrap those in a policy. So a policy is what controls how the workflow gets executed and when. A workflow doesn't have to go search every available data source that's out there. Here I can see a list of different policies are out there. I have two different policies for file shares, one for my personal workstation, a different one for my network. One's looking at files by age, another one's looking at files looking for Social Security information or PCI information. You'll notice the red and the green dots. That simply indicates the ones with green dots are policies that have a schedule. They run on a consistent schedule, daily, weekly, monthly, however frequently you would like to run them. The ones with the red icon are simply manually executed policies. And if we look at how a policy gets set up, we click on Action, we click Edit, and this takes us into the policy. So the policy controls, as I said, the execution of the workflow. We give it a descriptive name. We tell it which workflow do I want to execute. If I've already run a policy and I have a set of report data, I can actually create a policy that will run the workflow against the existing report contents. It doesn't have to run against a data target. So if I have a large report of information and I now want to analyze just that subset of information, I can run my policy against a report. My policies can be run in live mode or in test mode, because in my workflow, some of the actions I can take would be to move a file on a positive result, or to copy a file, or even delete a file if a result is positive. I may want to run that in test mode first to see what it would do before it actually executes. Right? I can set my time zone. If I'm searching against mailboxes, I can ignore mailboxes that are on hold. And then I can actually retrieve full text information about the files as I analyze them. So if I click this button to say retrieve full text, I can now say get me full text information for every file that's analyzed, or I just want to get a sampling. So bring back 100 files of full text. Don't bring back every single file. I then go to next, and this is where I start to take advantage of my individual data targets. Now I can select which specific targets do I want to run this policy against. Right, so I can come in here, I can say I want to add additional targets. I'm going to come in here and select my Windows file paths. Here's my connector. Here are the targets that it's aware of. Well, now I could come in and say, you know what? I also want to run this policy against the users folder and maybe also against the admin folder. I click OK. Those two targets get added to the list of data targets. And now when the policy executes, it will analyze all three of these locations and everything underneath. And then if I want to set up a schedule, this is where I can come in now and set the schedule up. So I could say, you know what, I want this to run periodically, once a day, twice a day, on certain days. Most frequently, I'm setting up to run at certain times on certain days. So maybe every Sunday, I would like to run this policy at 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. But you know what? If I'm actually looking for files that are over a certain age, you know, maybe I'm looking for everything over 5 years old, I probably don't need to run that once a week. Maybe I now run it on the first week of each month or on the fourth week of each month at 4 a.m. on Sunday, because that's often enough. I can save that. And once I have my policy ready to go, I can update it. And then I can just have it execute on its schedule. Or for my manual policies, I can come in here and click Start. And that's all there is to configuring workflows and policies. Now, once they've run, what I get back is a lot of information about what was found. So here I ran a policy to look for everything over 7 years old on my file share. You see a column here that says there's a report available. I click the report. This takes me into and shows me the report information, tells me when it was last run, how many results there were. And to view the report, I can simply click on it. And here's the information that I had configured the workflow to return. The path, the file name, modified date, created date, the size, even the hash value for the file, so I could identify files that were duplicates if I wanted to. Again, I can sort by any of these columns. So if I wanted to maybe sort by last modified date and see the oldest files, I can quickly do that. And you notice the little red indicator here? Going back to that full text checkbox, this is where I can see my full text information. If I click the icon, it now brings up the full text view of that file that was captured. So I can see more information about what it is. All of my reports can be exported to a CSV file. So once I do that, now I can open it up in reporting tools. I can open it up in Excel. Here's that same report. It's been exported to Excel. I've opened it up, and I've even used Excel's formatting tools to go through and identify every hash value that has a duplicate. Now, if I quickly want to see what my duplicates are, I come in here, I sort the data, and sort it by the hash value. And now I can see, ooh, one file has been duplicated a lot because it's a demo file, right? So once I have the data, I can start to do a lot of things with it. If I want to see all of my reports, I click on Policy Reports. This shows me all of the available reports that are out there. If the same report has been run multiple times, I'll have the historical copies of it, so I can do kind of delta incremental changes. And here's one that was run against my G Suite. There are 8 items that matched. Again, if I click the report, here are the matching items. This one even showed me the text that matched in the test. So it shows me the suspect text. And again, I have my full text information available that I can click. Here's that file that shows everything, you know, the full text of the file. Okay. So data governance gives me the ability to search against all my targets, look for all types of information, have that information come back, generate reports that give me good visibility into what I have out there. Data classification is similar, yet a little different. Data classification goes out and runs, and not only does it analyze what's out there, but it can actually assign labels to information that it finds based on the analytics that you do. So here I've gone out, I've analyzed my network file shares, and I said, I want to identify my contracts, my invoices, my documents that contain personal health information, and my documents that contain PII information. All right, so I've gone out and I've run that, and as I do the analysis, I actually am able to write these labels back to the properties of the file, so that will follow along with the file. These labels can be defined by you, so you can create any number of labels that are specific to your industry, to your company, and then again, just like I do with data governance, I create a workflow. That workflow has various tests in it that will go out, and I'm just going to jump down to the file sequence here and do my different tests. It tests for social security number, again, using regular expressions, strings, but this time it will actually tag the file with the appropriate label based on the conditional test. And so now I can come out and run tests. So I could create a test that has a whole string of different terms that may identify a file that's a personal health information. If I find that, I want to classify the file accordingly. If I find a document that contains a bunch of terms specific to a contract, I want to capture that, and I then want to tag the file as a contract. So I can set up any number of these conditions to start looking for information and identifying the types of files they are. If it contains terms like bill to, buyer name, invoice, purchase order, I may be able to guess that it's a PO or an invoice, or at least identify it and have somebody go out and specifically identify, take a look at it. Right. When I run my classification, I get my results. My results are shown very similar to my data governance results. Here again, I can see my full text information if I need to. Here's my contract. Here's all the information about that contract. It can show me the snippet of information that was found that caused this document to be labeled a certain way. Right? And again, I can sort this however I need to. So maybe I now want to come in here and organize it by label, sort by the label name, let's do it inverse. Here's some PII information. Again, here's one that it found based on saying this looks like a social security number. So I'm going to label it as PII. I can always come in as an administrator or as a business analyst and change the classification or remove the classification if it's incorrect, right? But now I begin to have visibility into what's going on out there and what's being done. And then lastly are the analytics, right? In addition to the reports that are generated by the individual workflows and policies, I can capture analytics on the overall scope of what's going on. So we're gathering all of this data about the information, and that can be used to generate different reports. There are standard reports that are provided. So if I want to come in, for example, and see, let me show me all of my emails by age. This flicks up a pie chart that shows me, well, here's all your emails that are over 10 years. Here's your emails that are less than 1 year old. Here's your emails that are 3 to 6 years old, just kind of in a quick pie chart view. If I come back to reports and I want to see, let's say, file size by type, it'll break it down for me. 6 gigs of unknown stuff. So maybe I need to go analyze my reports a little better. 2 gigs of application data. Another almost 3 gigs of system data, right? And this is just in a demo environment. You can already see the numbers are jumping up pretty big. I can generate trend reports over the course of time, show me how the volume of information I'm analyzing is increasing or hopefully decreasing as I do remediation. And I can create dashboards. So dashboards allow me to come in and take any of those standard reports, put them together in a set of widgets, and now display them as a dashboard. So here's all my file counts by age. Here's my attachments by type. If we scroll down here, here are my different file counts by type. Right, so I get a quick visual of everything that's going on. Again, as an analyst or as an administrator, I can log in here daily, weekly, whatever, and quickly get a glance and compare this to what did it look like last week? Right? Has suddenly something radically shifted? Did it shift in a good way, or did it shift in a bad way because somebody dumped a bunch of things out onto the network file share, for example? So that's kind of an overview of Altitude and kind of the core functionality there. You know, again, as Chris talked about, it's really designed to go out, identify your various data sources, the different data targets, allow you to define a variety of different actions and analytics you may want to perform on that information, and then provide you a set of results back that you can analyze, you can see, and you can make intelligent decisions about how to manage that information. So with that, I'm going to turn it back, and we'll put up the last couple of slides, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And Chris, I will let you share the slides again.
Great, and we're also gonna just do one more poll question while we get the slides up and get ready for the Q&A. You should see it on your screen.
Yeah, so after everything we've walked you through with Altitude, what's your best guess on how much information do you have that might be rot, redundant, obsolete, or just trash? Give us your best guess. Or if you've actually done a detailed analysis, we'd love to know. Or if you've never thought about it and realize, uh-oh, I need to think about it, you can click the last box here.
Okay, so Dean, I'll go ahead and finish up on this last slide.
Okay.
So while you're finishing that and looking at the poll results, and we'll go over those in a second, this is kind of refresh on the key benefits of Gimbal Altitude. So just as we were saying how we solve this problem ultimately, we can analyze files so we can clean up redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. We can discover and govern that data in all your corporate data sources. So it's not just focused on one, but it's focused on the entire enterprise. Then we can start locating and remediating not just sensitive data, but private data as well. And we can classify discovered content according to policy. And I don't think we really mentioned it much here, but we can also send that classified information over to our records management system as well.
Yep. And, you know, looking at the poll results here, 25 to 50, most of you are estimating 25 to 50% of your information is rot. That's a big number, you know. And I know everybody says storage is cheap, but it's not that cheap. And the management of that storage is definitely not cheap. So with that, I guess we're going to move into the Q&A. There was one question that came up in the chat that said, did I miss about the role administration in Altitude? I didn't go into that level of detail today just because of the time frame. But there is the ability either through policy, how policies are created, or through the administration to kind of define who can do what and you know, what information might they see.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and start reading off the questions in the Q&A section, Dean and Chris, if you want to get ready. So the first one we have is, are these browsers-based dashboards intended for data owners or Altitude administrators? Can you grant the ability for Bob to manage site X, Y, and Z and not see any others?
Yeah, Dean, I think that's I think I know what they're getting there. Is the act is you can have different, the data owners and the data managers, or we can call them custodians, are a little bit different. So you can absolutely set a policy up that one person in your organization is working with, and not the other ones. However, what I want to be clear is that we're not affecting the permissions of the sites themselves. So we can give you, certain people could see the analysis of one site versus the other, but we're not setting permissions, and we're not actually going into something like SharePoint and telling you who can see which site. You don't touch permissions in the system at all.
Yep. You could also, and one of the things you can do if you wanted to run analytics and then have certain people see certain information is, depending on how you design the workflow, you can limit what data targets that workflow is executed against. So I could have a policy that runs against areas I want Chris to be able to see, and then have the results automatically emailed to Chris. He would never even have to log into Altitude.
Right.
So you can do things like that as well.
Okay, the next one, how are data owners defined and discovered?
So data owners, you can manually define them or you can build them to be automatic. So a couple ideas here when we think about it. Let's say that you have OneDrive working, or maybe you have your user set up in a network share where every user has their own directory. You can use what we call tokens to go in there and automatically look at the UNC path or URL or whatever it might be and assign very specific things to different data owners. And the same with mailboxes. So it really becomes, if done right, more of an automated type of way to do it, which is the right way. But you can also go in and just say, okay, this particular network share is owned by these people or this group. So, sometimes it has to be done manually because it's not obvious who the owner might be.
Great. The next question, in the workflow view, when an expression was being edited, it seemed as though there was a level of crawling. Is the app using any kind of AI or machine learning?
Not yet. It is something we're working on, and we plan to add in the future is AI and machine learning to the system. But right now, where you say crawling is, yeah, we're actually looking through the full the content of each file or each piece of content, whether it's email or a file, and deciphering it from that way. Running regular expressions against it and things like that.
Okay. The next one, how can you enforce information security when it scans personal email folders?
Well, I think in this one here is maybe that's some confusion on what our system's actually doing. We're not enforcing information security inside of a system. We're not changing the security of a system or doing anything with security where we're setting that up. When we're scanning personal email folders, what we're doing is you're going to have an admin account of some type that can do that. So the admin is going to have to go in and scan those personal email folders. So it's not something you're doing at the individual level.
Yeah, one thing I would add there, Chris, though, is if you're concerned about, let's say I'm scanning and I go through Shayna's Gmail and she has personal emails in there as well, that I wouldn't want to display her credit card information, for example, that it found to Chris as the business analyst. You can have it identify the file contains credit card information, but in the report, it would actually mask the credit card number itself. So it wouldn't display, like I showed in the demo, it showed you the number.
Yeah.
You could actually have it mask that information.
Yeah, good point, Dean, thanks.
And then this one I think was answered in a previous question. It says, similar to the previous question, when the classification tool is classifying, is there any kind of AI or automation to help identify?
Yeah, same thing, not yet. It's something we're working on and we do plan to add.
Okay, the next one, if our current SharePoint records files do not have any workflow set up, is this possible to set up when Gimbal is installed with our SharePoint? And do the workflows need to be set up initially in SharePoint?
No, they don't. So this system totally runs outside of SharePoint and the SharePoint workflows. So the workflows are running inside of our system. So regardless of what you've done in SharePoint in the past, it's not going to impact the ability for us to do workflows.
Next one, how can this be leveraged with Gimbal Records Management?
So right now, this is sort of our first release of it, is what we're doing is we're taking the classification results from network file shares only. So Dean had talked about, showed the classification, and he showed those labels that are getting created. So those labels are being sent over to Gimbal Records Management. So then we can use those inside of our rules engine to to set up and actually get things as part of a policy and part of a record classification. Right now, we're not doing other sources, but we do plan on adding these other sources over time as well.
Great. And how many predefined policies come out of the box?
Dean, can you answer that?
Yeah, there's probably, I would guess, 10 to, no, about 15 or 16 example workflows for the different types of data sources. So I guess, I would consider those kind of the basic templates, and then you can build off of those
Yeah,
to create your specifics.
and that's typically what's done is you typically take one that's already there and you use it as a template to do more.
Okay, and are there any limits to the file types or formats you can scan and search? And does the search also work against any file properties, file shares, or metadata SharePoint available in the source?
Okay, there's always going to be a limit somewhere. I don't ever want to say that we can read every file format. We can read most of them, but there's probably some bizarre formats out there that we don't know about that that we can't read. But if you think about all the common files, it's several hundred. I think there's 400 different types that we can read against.
Yeah, and if you recall during when I was showing the workflow, I could search the file contents, but I could also search the file name for the string or the pattern. So you could do that as well.
Right.
Right, and the next one, would this service be included in a license for Gimbal Compliance Suite?
No, it's not. That's a different. It's a different SKU completely. So this would be an add-on to Gimbal Compliance Suite.
All right, and the last one, can I export records from altitude?
Well, maybe there's I might be misunderstanding that a little bit. So let me kind of talk about what's possible there. Exporting records I would kind of think about the record being the file itself. We don't necessarily yes, we can. We can take those files and we can move them somewhere else. So, which is sort of an export. So we can just pick them up and move them to another location. The other thing is the report that's generated. The report can list all of the files. So, you can export that as like a CSV file or Excel file. So by building the report, that's also possible just to get a list of those different files. So I don't know if I answered that or not. If not, contact us and we can dig deeper into that.
And then we actually have one more. Do the connectors use your own credentials or a quote service account? How does this relate to the data you have access to in the sources?
Yeah, normally you're using a type of service account to do it because we're scanning through it at a higher level. So we're scanning through an entire user share. If we have to use individual accounts, it would have to use every individual account to go through it, and that's not very efficient. So really for us is the connector is going to run, and whoever is running that connector, whatever account that it's giving is what it's going to run under.
Great. Well, that's the last of the questions. Thank you, everybody. Those are some great questions. A lot of great participation, so we really appreciate that. It looks like someone snuck one in right during the last second. Do you provide professional services to help get us started?
Absolutely. Yes, we do. And it's kind of assumed that you're going to need a little bit of help and a little bit of training. The good thing is these engagements are usually short term. They're not super long term engagements. We like to think that the system is pretty easy to set up.
Great. I'm giving it a second to see if any other ones are going to sneak in. It doesn't look like it. So if anyone has any further questions, or if you'd like to receive a personalized demo, probably from Dean himself, of this software, please feel free to email any one of us directly, or you can contact us through our website or at info@gimbal.com. And I know this was a question in the beginning, but for those of you who are interested, we will be sending a recording of this webinar to everyone within 24 to 48 hours. So if that concludes the session, and everybody, thank you for joining. We really appreciate it.